Sarah Thompson believed she was living a dream. At 32, she had a fulfilling job in publishing, a warm circle of friends, and a partner she loved fiercely. John Daniels was everything she thought she wanted in a man: charming, witty, dependable. They had met 4 years ago at a book fair in Abuja, where Sarah had been selling titles for a local author. John had walked in, bought 3 books he never ended up reading, and walked out with her number instead. For a while, they were inseparable. He made her laugh until her sides hurt, cooked her candlelit dinners on her bad days, and whispered promises of forever on nights they lay tangled in each other's arms. To anyone watching, they were the perfect couple. But perfect doesn't last. It started subtly. John stopped showing up for Friday night wine sessions with Sarah's friends. He began coming home later, first blaming traffic, then work, then something as vague as just needed some air. He locked his phone more often, turned it over when it buzzed, answered calls in the kitchen instead of in front of her. Maybe he's just stressed, Sarah told herself, stirring her tea in the empty living room while John claimed to be catching up with friends at a bar. Work's been insane, he had said just that morning, kissing her cheek and grabbing his keys. You know how it is with this new campaign. She nodded, ignoring the pinch in her chest. She wanted to believe him. After all, they'd been through so much together, moving cities, starting new jobs, weathering a family death. Relationships had ups and downs. He was just in a rough patch, right? But the signs kept stacking. He stopped asking how her day went. He forgot their weekend plans. His cologne lingered stronger than usual, like it had just been freshly reapplied. And twice now, Sarah had noticed a faint smear of pink gloss on the edge of his shirt collar. When she pointed it out, he chuckled. Lip balm from the receptionist. She gives hugs like a mom, he said, shrugging it off. You're being paranoid. She laughed along, even though it didn't feel funny. The Sarah of 2 years ago would have trusted her gut. But the Sarah now, tired, longing for security, desperate to hold onto the only stable thing left in her life, chose to look the other way. She buried herself in work, planned romantic weekend getaways that John always canceled last minute, defended him when her best friend, Miriam, casually mentioned he was tagged in someone's Instagram story at a club, when he told Sarah he was at home watching Netflix. He's not like that, Sarah insisted, brushing it off. It must have been an old video. But even as she said it, her heart sank. There was a nagging whisper inside her, a gnawing, growing ache that something was wrong. But every time it surfaced, she smothered it with memories. His birthday surprise for her 2 years ago, the way he held her when she lost her father, the note he once left on her mirror that said, "Forever, no matter what." So she stayed quiet. She waited. She hoped. And in doing so, Sarah ignored the red flags fluttering all around her like warning signs before storm. There was a time when Sarah would smile in her sleep, dreaming of a white dress and vows whispered under the Lego sun. She had imagined a future with John so vividly, kids with his smile and her stubbornness, a house filled with books and laughter, weekend getaways to Obudu and Zanzibar. She clung to those dreams like a lifeline, because, without them, what was she even holding on to? She told herself love required patience, that no relationship was perfect, that real love meant weathering storms. So she held on, even when the signs grew louder. John's absences became more frequent, his explanations thinner. There were nights he came home smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't hers, the kind that clung to the air long after he kissed her goodnight. But love made excuses. Sarah played the understanding girlfriend. She cooked his favorite meals, sent encouraging texts, even surprised him at work once, only to find out he was on a call and couldn't come down. The receptionist had looked confused. Oh, he said he was out with a client. When Sarah asked later, he snapped. You're not my mother, Sarah. You can't just show up at my job like that. She apologized. And still she stayed. Her friends grew quieter about him. Miriam stopped bringing him up altogether. Once at dinner, when another friend casually said, "So, Sarah, you and John still good?" Her voice held a weight that Sarah didn't want to unpack. She forced a smile and nodded. "We're solid. Just life, you know." But doubt had started to rot the edges of her thoughts. She found herself scrolling through his tagged photos late at night. She started noticing a name that kept popping up in comments. Mel. Mel, with a perfectly curated Instagram feed. Mel with the flirty comments under John's posts. Mel with the heart eye emojis. One Saturday morning, Sarah finally broke. John was in the shower. His phone was on the bed, unlocked. She didn't mean to snoop. She swore she wasn't that girl. But her hand moved before she could stop herself. Her heart thudded in her chest as she opened his messages. There it was. A thread with Mel. Dozens of messages. Photos. Flirtation that left no room for interpretation. Her hand trembled as she scrolled. One message hit her like a slap. Last night was perfect. Can't stop thinking about you. Wish I was waking up next to you again. Sarah dropped the phone like it burned. Her chest tightened. The air in the room suddenly felt too heavy to breathe. She stood there frozen, staring at the bedsheets, the same sheets she had slept on, laughed on, trusted on. Tears blurred her vision, but they didn't fall. Not yet. She moved to the mirror and looked at herself, really looked. Pale under her dark skin. Eyes wide. Lips pressed tightly to hold everything in. She couldn't hear the shower anymore. John emerged, wrapped in a towel, rubbing his hair with another. You okay, babe? Sarah turned slowly. Her voice cracked. Who is Mel? He froze. For a second, just one, guilt flashed across his face. Then came the practiced smirk, the soft chuckle. Mel? She's just a friend. You know how people joke around. It's not serious. Last night was perfect. Her voice was sharper now. Louder. John exhaled heavily and sat on the edge of the bed, towel still around his waist. You're reading too much into things. That message wasn't for, it was, he scratched his head. We kissed, okay? It was a mistake. A mistake, she whispered. He reached out. Sarah. She stepped back. Everything inside her screamed. Every suppressed instinct, every ignored red flag, every quiet doubt she had tucked away in the name of love. It all came crashing down in one wave of clarity. She had ignored what her heart already knew. Love hadn't made her blind. She chose to close her eyes. Sarah had always imagined that if someone betrayed her, she'd scream. That she'd throw something, maybe a vase or his favorite wristwatch. That she'd demand answers in a fit of rage. But when it finally happened, she found herself quiet. Too quiet. Who is Mel? She asked again, her voice barely above a whisper. John froze for a heartbeat. Towel still slung around his neck. He looked at her like someone caught mid-crime. She's just a friend, he muttered. I told you, you're reading into things. But the lie came too fast. Too rehearsed. Sarah held up the phone. She said she wished she woke up next to you. She sent you selfies, John. At midnight. He sighed, rubbing his face. Look, I didn't sleep with her, okay? We hung out a few times. We flirted. That's it. It didn't mean anything. Sarah stared at him, the weight of his words pressing into her chest like a stone. It didn't mean anything to you. But what about me? What about what we built? John looked away. That silence was worse than the lie. I don't know, I was tired, he said finally. Tired of the routine. Everything felt predictable. You've changed, Sarah. You used to laugh more, be more fun. Lately, it's like you're just serious all the time. Her mouth dropped open. You cheated because I was serious. Her voice trembled, rising. Because I grew up and wanted a real life, a future? You wanted party games instead of commitment. That's not fair. No, John. What's not fair is being lied to. Being made to feel crazy for asking simple questions. I defended you. I defended you to everyone. He threw his hands up. I didn't ask you to. That broke something. She stood perfectly still, the walls spinning around her. Every word he said was a chisel, carving away at what little love remained. Then something shifted in John's tone. Look, maybe we just need space, he said. Maybe this whole thing got too intense. I never promised we get married. Sarah blinked. What? We talked about it, sure, he said softer now, trying to regain control. But that doesn't mean we have to. People change. "No, John," she said, stepping back. "You changed." In that moment, everything became crystal clear. It wasn't just the texts, or the perfume, or the missed dates. It was the erosion, the slow unraveling of their love, thread by thread, while she fought to hold the fabric together alone. He had let go a long time ago. She just hadn't noticed. Or maybe she had, and chose not to see it. "You knew what you were doing," she said. "You let me dream while you were entertaining someone else." John shrugged, as if it were just a matter of perspective. "You want me to grovel? Fine. I messed up, but don't act like you were perfect. You're not exactly easy to live with." Her voice cracked again. "I didn't need perfect. I just needed honesty." Silence stretched between them. John finally turned away, walking toward the wardrobe. "I'm gonna get dressed. Maybe we can talk later when you've calmed down." But Sarah didn't want to talk later. She wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. But more than anything, she wanted to reclaim herself from the ruins of what they used to be. As he moved around the room, she sat on the edge of the bed, numb. Her fingers grazed the fabric of the bedsheet, the same sheets he had shared with her. And now they felt poisoned. This wasn't just heartbreak. It was betrayal by 1,000 cuts. She had given him everything, her time, her loyalty, her heart. And he treated it like an option. She stood slowly, walking out of the room with her phone clutched tightly in hand. She didn't slam the door. She didn't cry yet. But inside she knew a chapter had ended, and another was waiting to be written. Sarah didn't remember standing up. She only remembered walking, aimlessly, without thought, like her body had taken over, so her mind could shut down for a while. She ended up at Miriam's place. The moment the door opened, Miriam didn't say a word. She just opened her arms and let Sarah fall into them. Sarah sobbed, loud, choking sobs that made her knees buckle. All the hurt she had held in finally erupted like a storm she couldn't outrun anymore. They sat on the couch, a soft blanket wrapped around Sarah's shoulders like a shield. Her tea went cold. Her phone buzzed, once, twice, and then stopped. John's name blinked across the screen until it vanished into silence. "He's still calling?" Miriam asked gently. Sarah didn't answer. Her fingers clenched the cup as if it could hold her together. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "I feel like everything I believed in was a lie." "It wasn't a lie," Miriam said. "He just didn't deserve your truth." Sarah closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I stayed, even when it didn't feel right, even when I knew. What does that say about me?" "That you loved," Miriam replied, "and that you hoped. That doesn't make you weak, Sarah. It makes you human." But Sarah didn't feel human. She felt hollow. Days passed. She didn't return home. Not right away. Miriam insisted she stay, and Sarah didn't fight it. She needed the distance. She needed space to think. When she finally walked back into the apartment she had once called home, it felt foreign, like walking into someone else's life. The framed pictures on the wall, the throw blanket she'd picked out, the fridge magnets from vacations they'd taken, all of it stared back at her like ghosts. John wasn't there. A note was, "I'll give you time, but I hope we can talk soon. Jay." She folded it without reading it again. In the bedroom, she stared at the wardrobe, at his side of the closet, at the shirts that still carried his scent. She wanted to burn everything. But instead, she sat down and started packing, not his things, hers. Because she wasn't going to stay. Not this time. The decision didn't come with relief. It came with grief. Walking away from someone you loved wasn't as clean as slamming a door. It was a slow, quiet mourning of every moment, every memory, every what-if. But staying would have meant losing herself. And Sarah had already lost enough. She moved into a small flat closer to work. It wasn't much, a one-bedroom with creaky floors and a tiny balcony. But it was hers. The silence there was different. It didn't ache. It allowed her to rebuild. She stopped checking his social media. She muted his number. She changed the locks. The first night in her new space, she cried. Not because she missed him, but because she finally felt the absence of the version of herself she used to be. The version that believed love had to hurt to be real. She started journaling, walking in the evenings, saying no more often. She cut her hair just a few inches, but it felt like reclaiming something, a symbolic shedding of the weight she had carried for far too long. At work, people noticed the shift. "You look different," her colleague said. "Lighter." And maybe she was. Healing didn't come all at once. Some nights still felt raw. Sometimes a song or a scent would drag her back into a memory she hadn't prepared for. But each day, she stood a little taller. She didn't regret loving John, but she regretted not loving herself more. There was no grand epiphany, no dramatic moment when everything suddenly made sense. Healing didn't announce itself. It arrived slowly, quietly, like sunrise through dusty curtains. One morning, Sarah caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror and didn't look away. She didn't see the woman who once begged for scraps of affection. She saw someone braver, wiser. The sadness in her eyes hadn't vanished, but it no longer defined her. It lived beside her strength. She began journaling again, scribbling down thoughts she used to silence. Love doesn't have to hurt. Red flags aren't puzzles, they're warnings. Trust is sacred. So is self-worth. These weren't just affirmations. They were reminders carved out of pain. Sarah started noticing things she once ignored. The subtle tightening in her chest when she had to explain away someone else's disrespect. The way she used to apologize for needing reassurance. How she often prioritized being loved over being safe. She remembered the moment that stayed with her the most, not when she found the messages, not even when John denied their weight, but when he said, "I never promised we'd get married," as if her dreams were just assumptions. That moment replayed in her mind often, not with rage, but as a lesson. Love is not owed, but honesty is. She began to see the red flags not as mistakes she'd made, but as signals she had been too afraid to trust. There had been signs, the flinching when she asked simple questions, the blame shifting, the slow erosion of intimacy disguised as stress and distraction. She wasn't angry at herself anymore. She had loved with her whole heart. That was never the problem. The problem was not walking away the first time her instinct screamed. So she made a promise, not about avoiding pain, but about trusting herself more. A few weeks later, she was invited to a small relationship panel at a community women's circle. She didn't speak much, just listened. But toward the end, when someone asked how to tell if something is truly wrong in a relationship, she found herself answering. "When you start explaining someone else's behavior to protect your peace," she said gently, "that's the moment you already know." The room went still. A few heads nodded slowly. She wasn't trying to sound wise. She was simply speaking the truth she had earned. That night, she sat on her tiny balcony with a glass of juice and looked out over the neighborhood. It was loud, generators humming, distant laughter, the rhythmic beat of life continuing. But in her corner of the world, there was peace. Her peace. She had stopped wondering if John had moved on. It no longer mattered. Whether he was with Mel or someone else was irrelevant. He had become a character in a past chapter, no longer the main plot. What mattered now was how she loved herself. She made space for things she had once postponed, sketching, rereading old novels, attending poetry nights. She wore her natural curls with pride. She stopped shrinking herself to make others more comfortable. And slowly, she found joy again. Not the kind that came from another person's approval, but the kind born from stillness, from waking up and liking the woman in the mirror, from choosing peace over chaos, truth over illusion. Sarah still believed in love, but not the kind that made her question her worth. She believed in a love that aligned with respect, with softness, with presence, and most importantly, with honesty. And until that love found her, she was okay with waiting, because she had finally learned to give it to herself first. It wasn't just about healing from heartbreak anymore. It had become something deeper. Sarah had spent years loving someone who couldn't love her the way she needed, and then months picking up the pieces. But now, for the first time in a long time, she was building something new. Not a relationship, not a future with someone else. Herself. She started saying yes to the things that filled her, and no to the things that drained her. It wasn't easy at first. The urge to explain herself to others, to prove she was okay, still crept in. But she began to realize she didn't owe anyone proof of her peace. At work, she stopped overextending herself. She delegated. She drew boundaries. She started leaving the office on time. And when one of her coworkers joked, "Who are you these days?" she smiled and said, "Someone who finally knows what she deserves." Even her boss noticed. "You seem different," he said one day in a meeting. "I am," Sarah replied, her tone calm but certain. "I've stopped putting myself last." She didn't need applause for it. She didn't crave validation. The change was for her. She began visiting new places, cafes she'd always passed by but never entered, bookstores tucked away in quiet corners of the city. She explored markets alone and treated herself to little things that made her smile: scented candles, a silver anklet, a bold shade of lipstick she used to think was too much for her. It wasn't about becoming someone else. It was about remembering who she'd been before she molded herself to fit someone else's expectations. One Sunday, she stood in front of her mirror wearing a wrap dress she hadn't touched in over a year. It hugged her shape perfectly. Her curls framed her face like a crown. She looked regal. She whispered to her reflection, "I missed you." And she meant it. Her world began to shift, not because of some external miracle, but because of a quiet, intentional decision to choose herself, over and over again. She reconnected with old friends, laughed louder, danced in her living room with music playing on low volume and the balcony door open to the night. She didn't check her phone to see if John would reach out anymore. His silence no longer haunted her. It became background noise, a reminder of what she had outgrown. One evening, Miriam came over for dinner. They sat on Sarah's balcony, enjoying jollof rice and suya with a soft breeze cutting through the heat. "You've changed," Miriam said, raising a glass of zobo. "But in the best way." "I had to," Sarah replied, clinking her glass gently against hers. "Losing him hurt, but losing myself would have been worse." Miriam nodded, eyes warm. "You didn't just survive it, Sarah. You transcended it." Sarah smiled. She still had tough days. There were still moments where she flinched at old memories. Still quiet nights when she questioned how things could have gone so wrong with someone she loved so deeply. But those moments didn't define her anymore. She had reclaimed her voice, her worth, her space. She was no longer living in the aftermath of heartbreak. She was living in the presence of her own power. Self-love wasn't something Sarah had fully understood before. For most of her adult life, love had been about giving, showing up, fixing things, compromising, holding on. She had confused sacrifice with loyalty, endurance with devotion. But now it meant something else. It meant peace. It meant boundaries. It meant not apologizing for taking up space. Sarah began her mornings differently. She woke up without dread. She opened her windows wide and let in the air. She brewed her tea slowly. No rushed calls, no anxious texts, no lingering fear of missteps. And in that quiet, she began to hear her own voice again. She started writing again, not for work or deadlines, but for herself. Small poems, letters she never sent, memories she released one page at a time. She wrote about the girl she had been, the woman she had become, and the love she now reserved for herself. One afternoon, while flipping through an old journal, she found an entry from a year ago. "I feel like I'm always waiting for him to show up, for things to get better, for the version of us I missed to come back." She stared at it for a long time, and then, with a steady hand, she crossed it out and wrote beneath it, "I no longer wait. I live." The change wasn't loud. It was gentle but powerful. She didn't need anyone to notice. But the world did. At a neighborhood yoga class, the instructor asked them to close their eyes and whisper a mantra they believed in. Sarah's was simple: "I am enough." It became a quiet anthem, repeated during long walks, whispered before meetings, written on sticky notes around her home. One weekend, she treated herself to a spa day. No occasion, no reason other than the fact that she wanted to feel cared for, by herself. She picked out a dress afterward, not to impress anyone, but because she liked how it felt on her skin. She smiled at her reflection, took a photo, and captioned it. "Peace looks good on me." And it did. She no longer sought closure from John. She had given herself what he never could, the truth. The truth that she was not hard to love. The truth that she didn't fail him. He failed her. And most importantly, that walking away wasn't her loss. It was her liberation. Sometimes, when she passed couples on the street or scrolled past happy posts online, a flicker of loneliness would stir in her chest. But it wasn't the aching kind anymore. It didn't sting like it used to. It simply reminded her that love still mattered, but not at the cost of her peace. One evening, as she journaled with the balcony door open, her phone buzzed. A number she didn't recognize. She hesitated, then let it ring out. She no longer jumped at unknown calls. She no longer feared unfinished stories. She was no longer a character in someone else's script. She was the author now. She looked up at the sky. The stars were just beginning to peek out. She smiled. She didn't need someone to love her back to feel complete. She loved herself. And that was the most powerful thing she had ever done. Sarah wasn't in a rush to start a new love chapter. She was just beginning to enjoy her peace. But life, with its quiet sense of humor, had other plans. It started with Miriam. "My brother's back in town," she said, swirling a spoon in her tea. "You know the one in Germany, the annoying millionaire one? He came with his best friend, and they want to hang out. He insisted I bring someone." Sarah narrowed her eyes. "You're not matchmaking again, are you?" Miriam grinned. "No pressure. Just come. You've been glowing lately, and honestly, it's a crime to waste that glow indoors." After much resistance, Sarah gave in. She wore a satin wine-red dress, simple, flattering, and elegant. Her curls framed her face with effortless beauty. Miriam gasped when she saw her. "Okay, now I am matchmaking." They met at an upscale rooftop restaurant. Soft jazz played in the background. The Lagos skyline glittered in the distance, and the breeze was just right. Miriam's brother Dami stood as they approached, tall, confident, dressed in a sharp-tailored suit with a Rolex that said old money. But his eyes locked on Sarah, and for a moment he forgot to speak. "You must be Sarah," he said, lips curving into a smile. Miriam didn't do you justice. Sarah offered a modest smile. "Nice to meet you, Dami." He wasn't the only one watching her. From across the room, a familiar voice called out hesitantly, "Sarah." She turned. There he was, Daniel, frozen mid-step, dressed casually but well, with that same crooked smile that once charmed her, but now carried less power. He looked stunned, like seeing a ghost, but one that had only grown more luminous with time. "You look," he trailed off. Before he could finish, Dami stood up, stepping beside Sarah protectively. "And you must be?" His tone was polite but firm. Daniel blinked. "Her ex," he replied, his voice small. Miriam, not missing a beat, added coolly, "A closed chapter." Just then, two well-dressed, broad-shouldered security guards walked over with quiet authority. "Sir, is this man bothering you?" one asked Dami, voice calm but unmistakably firm. Daniel quickly raised his hands. "Of course not. Just saying hello to an old friend." He glanced at Sarah again. She hadn't said a word. She didn't have to. She looked regal, radiant, unreachable. He returned to his table, and a few moments later, Mel arrived, all glammed up and smiling wide. But Daniel barely noticed her. His eyes kept drifting to the woman he used to know, and the life he threw away. Sarah, on the other hand, laughed freely with Miriam and Dami. The food was divine, the conversation light. Dami had a sharp wit and a calm energy that felt steady, grounding. That night, as she kicked off her heels and stretched on her couch, a message buzzed on her phone. Unknown number. * Sarah. I've been thinking a lot. I'm sorry. For everything. I could have handled it better. You didn't deserve that. I hope you're doing well. I really do. J*. She stared at it for a moment. Not in pain. Not in rage. No tears. No confusion. Just a soft, quiet smile. Not for him, but for herself. For choosing peace. for choosing self-worth, for closing the chapter when it needed to end. She placed her phone face down and turned off the lamp. Tomorrow was a new day, and she would face it, not as someone waiting to be loved, but as someone who finally knew that she was more than enough. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, you may never see us again. Subscribe now and turn on post notification for our next story.